Okay, I think we're all ready to go. It's just past 7 o'clock. So we will get started. So we'd like to acknowledge this land that we meet on today as the traditional lands of the Kaurna people, and we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the custodians of the greater Adelaide region, and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still as important to the living Kaurna people today. Okay, we'll move into item 2, which is the attendance record. I think everybody is present. We're not missing anyone. No apologies. Any motions to grant leave of absence? No. Any leave of absence? No, and no non-attendance. Okay, item 3. Are there any declarations of interest? No, no declarations of interest. We'll move on to item 4, which is the confirmation of the minutes. So the recommendation is that the minutes of the Audit and Risk Committee held on the 8th of November 22, which seems like a long time ago, be confirmed as true and correct. Got it moved by Mayor Redmond. I've got a seconder, Christine Hahn. All in favour? All in favour? Motion carried. Okay, item 5. Are there any business arising from the minutes? No, no business arising from the minutes. All right. Okay, we'll move on to item 6, which is the decision reports. So 6.1 is the appointment of deputy chairperson. So we've got the officer's recommendation to appoint someone as deputy chairperson. We've had a nomination who's been supported by the audit committee. So I nominate Christine Hahn as a deputy chairperson. Have I got someone that would move that? Peter Fairley-Jones move it, and second, yep, Mayor Redmond. So all in favour? Carried. Oh, congratulations, Christine. Oops, that's all. Got to get used to my intercom again. Every time. You might be taking control sooner than later. Okay. Item 6.2 is the update to the Audit and Risk Committee term of reference. So, yeah, Mayor Redmond, have you got a...
There is an error in the terms of reference on page 10 of our agenda, or 10 of the attachments, page 8 of the terms of reference. 6.2, it talks about a code of conduct for council members. That doesn't exist anymore. It's now behavioural standards. I have brought up this previously, and the section of the Local Government Act is 75E and 75F. Well, it hasn't been removed. So yeah, it came up previously. So if that, I'm happy to move with that amendment, as amended. I think otherwise, I think the terms of reference are fairly on the mark. Happy to move that way.
Thank you. Was there any other comments, Christine?
I've got a tiny comment and a question. So the tiny comment first, just in paragraph 3.7E, which is page 5 of the terms of reference. It's just called an audit committee there instead of audit and risk committee. So might just need to do a search and replace for things like that. My question is, with regard to appointment of chairman and deputy chairman, is there any requirement that either or both of those positions should be filled by independent members, or can it be anyone, any member?
Through the chair, no, there is no requirement that those positions
positions be filled by an independent member. However, I think with regard to the recent local government reform, the position was that that is probably the best practice, but there's no legal requirement that those positions be filled by independent members.
Christine?
Follow-up question. Do we want to put anything in the terms of reference about best practice or preference to be an independent member for either of the positions, or do we want to keep it open?
Has anyone got a comment on that?
I'd prefer it to be silent. I think that sort of appreciate the experience and skill of the independent members. But elected members also bring something to the table, which is local experience. And I think that to put that in, it might be a little bit divisive. I don't think it's necessary. I think most audit committee members that are elected members are quite happy to have an independent chair. We've had an independent chair for as long as I can remember, going back to the Alan Banafi days, and then Peter Brass, and now with Natalie Johnston. I don't think that's an issue at all.
I just want to clarify, I wasn't meaning to imply there was a difference in skill levels or experience between independents and councillors.
Thank you. Is there any other questions? No, well, if we've noted the amendments that are required to terms of reference, and moved by Mayor Redmond. Have we got a seconder? Peter Fairley-Jones, all in favour? Carried unanimously. Okay, moving on to 6.3, which is the second budget review. Does someone from management want to present on this item? Sharon, off you go.
Through the chair. So I probably just want to raise a couple of points with regard to the second budget review. As set out in the report, at this point in time, we are still forecasting a operating position that is similar to the adopted budget. However, there is an issue that has arisen as throughout undertaking the budget review with regard to depreciation. Members may recall that as part of the adoption of the financial statements, there was a large asset revaluation of around about $46 million that was processed through those accounts. And obviously that revaluation has the ongoing impact or flow-on impact through to depreciation. When the adopted budget, when the budget was developed, obviously that value of that revaluation was not aware. So the impact of that wasn't put through to the depreciation. However, having said that, I suppose me being an outsider, not being involved in the financial statements, I suppose I've probably questioned the value of that revaluation. And so at this point in time, before we take up or process that depreciation, I myself wanted a bit more understanding of what's actually driving that, and whether it is actually a result of a bit of a aberration because of the economic conditions at the time that potentially will drop off, that, you know, maybe this financial year or the next financial year will have a massive asset revaluation decrease, which basically offsets that. So we haven't taken it up at this point in time. We're going to do some further investigation, and we'll report back to the audit committee when we actually report back with regard to the third budget review, just to make sure that we as staff have an understanding of what's driving any increase, if there is an increase, or if that increase is actually real. So yeah, so with respect to that, and from an operational perspective, any variations that was put forward, we try to offset with savings that have been provided through the first 6 months of operations to actually offset that. But we do have a couple of major expenditure impacts that we didn't foresee, one being electricity, because the electricity market at the moment is quite volatile. Our existing contract finished up in December, and we have only just entered into a 6-month contract because of the increase in tariffs that we're actually getting through the negotiations. So we've tried to absorb some of that, potentially if as much as we can. And we'll just have to see how much more we can absorb as we actually go through the next 6 months of the financial year.
Thank you, Sharon. Are there any questions? Yeah, Mayor Redmond.
So I think you've answered my question, but will you be checking to see that the assets have been valued at fair value? Is that what you're assessing?
Through the chair, yes, that's where it is. I think that there's probably, just on the surface, from my perspective, it just seems an exceptionally high revaluation considering the asset base, because it's come predominantly from the road and curb and gutter assets. So it's just a question of making sure that the unit rates that were applied were relevant to the types of assets, because potentially the biggest asset that we've built or we've acquired in the last couple of years has been the link road, which would have been built at a different specification, so they would have had a different unit cost, and just making sure that that unit cost wasn't applied unilaterally across our existing assets to sit there and say that that would be the replacement cost. So yeah, so that's pretty much the primary focus at this point in time, and how that revaluation has actually been was calculated and applied.
Yes.
I'm really keen to hear the advice from the independent members in that regard. I hear that we need to get a bit more information back, but yeah, it does affect. It's a non-cash component, but it still does affect our bottom line. And as a mayor, as chief spokesperson of the council, I'd really like to hear what the independent members have to say. And I know that Peter, you earmarked this at least 3 or 4 years ago about depreciation. And I remember hearing you saying that when I started to look at this. So I'm really,
Oh, sorry. Peter?
Thank you, Mayor, for remembering. I can't. However, it is a very significant change, and it does bear scrutiny. I've come across this with another council that had a similar sort of impact. I'm interested to know who did the valuation. Can you tell us that?
I might defer to Erin or Lakesh, because I wasn't around the time, I wasn't here at the time, so I'm not quite sure who did the unit cost or the revaluation.
Through the chair, so asset engineering, I believe, did it, but I can take it on notice and just double check that for you.
Just to follow up, I'm just wondering whether it's worth getting another sort of independent review of their valuation data. I don't know what process you're actually going to go through, but maybe you can explain that, and maybe that part of it.
Yeah, that potentially that could be the position that we take. So at this point in time, we probably don't necessarily know where we're looking at and what pointing it at, what areas to point at. So we're just basically going through and interrogating the data at the moment to see if there's anything that sort of sticks out in the first instance to sort of allude to where the revaluation increase has actually been driven from. And whether some of the, I suppose, my thought processes, whether that's actually, so we can actually test those in that process. So as we go through that process, if we still think it's probably a fair and reasonable to actually go through and get another assessment done on, I suppose, the unit prices, because the way the valuation is undertaken is so effectively we do a rolling 5-year condition assessment, and then when we do the condition assessment, then we'll actually apply the unit prices based on that condition assessment perspective. And in the interim years, we just do an indexation based on the movement of what's happening in the market from the unit rates, plus what are the assets that we have built or added, and working out those costs. So it's a question on understanding what are the additions and what are the unit rates that were actually applied and how they were determined in the first instance. For them, we can make an assessment as to whether it's worthy of us going and having that assessment, another independent assessment on those unit prices.
The auditor here is Tim Malhausen, isn't it? Yeah. In the other case that I was involved with, he was very useful in discussing options around that. So I would certainly encourage you to talk to him about that.
Any other questions? No? Okay, so we have an officer's recommendation that the Audit and Risk Committee, there's 6 items there, endorses the second budget review, which is reporting the operating deficit of 1.364 million, improvement of 62,000 on the first budget review, which reported an operating deficit of 1.426 million. Just to note, we endorse the increase in the capital budget of 1.042 million, which is due to the Cabethan Reserve expansion project. We endorse the increase in loan borrowings of 881,000, primarily due to the Cabethan Reserve expansion project. We recommend to council that the pursuant to Regulation 9, 1 and 2 of the local government financial management regulations, budgeted financial statements and financial indicators and as contained within attachment 1 be adopted. We note that the material operational cost increases as detailed in the report have been offset by expenditure savings from across the organisation and revenue increases. And we note potential increase in the depreciation expense of 1.141 million arising from a full year effect of the 46 million asset revaluation reported in FY22. Statement of comprehensive income, and will be confirmed as part of the third budget. I've lost the line. Can you review? Yes.
Both yourself and Christine, have you got any comments to make and advice as independent members?
Don't have anything to add to what's already been suggested, but it's an issue that not only councils are facing at the moment with very large asset revaluations that possibly will reverse the next couple of years.
And I agree with the comments made that a review be done on each of the asset classes between the prior year balance and the current year balance to see which asset classes have been directly impacted. If there is a significant impact, then further investigation be made. And as Peter Fairley-Jones said, contact Tim from Galpins to see whether there's an independent valuer that can perform that revaluation and then incorporate it into the third budget review. I'm happy with that. So do I have a mover? Oh, sorry, Peter. Yep, go.
Another question before we move to close the item. I just wanted to ask about the LED conversions, and there's been some delay in that, which I think's been some cause of some of the cost increase in power costs. I think
The LED conversion.
yeah, yeah, sorry.
So pretty much the LED conversion is pretty much nearly completed. At this point in time, there has been some lights that have been identified that can't as readily be converted to LED because of the nature of the type of light they are. So there will be some throughout the city that haven't been converted, but pretty much that's pretty much completed now. So we will be seeing the, fortunately, because that's road, that project has been completed, we will still get the benefits of the price reduction, and the impact of the tariff increases isn't as bad as what it would have otherwise been.
Sorry, just one other question. It's mentioned in there that the FAGS grant has been treated as 50% advance in later this year. Do we actually know that the government is going to do that, or is just that an assumption we've made?
Through the chair, it's an assumption that I've made based on past practice, because effectively that's the federal government has always been silent in the budget papers about advancing, doing the advance payment. However, they have always done that, I think with the exception of 1 year since 2008 when they started introducing it. Also, given the current economic conditions, the floods and around the country, I suspect sitting there saying about the assumption is, yes, it's an assumption, but I think it's fairly, it's going to pretty much hold true, considering that the budget that was adopted only assumed that we would just receive that 1 quarter. So maybe wrong, but I suppose history sort of indicates that that's actually it's going to happen. So.
Any other questions? No. Okay, so we're going to move in Peter Fairley-Jones. Have I got a seconder? Christine Hahn. All in favour? Carried unanimously. All right. 6.4 is the policy review. And there are 4 policies up for review, being the rate rebates, the debtor management, treasury management, and expenditure. Before we go to the recommendation, do we have any questions in relation to the bundle all 4 of them together? But if there's any specific questions, Christine?
Just on the Treasury policy one, it's on page 40 of our papers. It talks about depositing in banks. I was just thinking that maybe we need to be a bit more prescriptive on the types of banks that we are happy to put deposit money into, and whether that's by credit grading or Australian banks only, or banks with a Gawler branch, or however we want to define it. When I was reading it, I was just thinking we wouldn't want to see any bank deposits going into a foreign country X bank.
Good point.
More than happy to specify Australian banks, but just for the committee's information. So our current policy is pretty much all our surplus funds are invested with the local government finance authority, and that the only, I suppose, bank that we actually have is our transactional bank. So any surplus funds, we just keep transferring those in through to the LGFA, but I'm more than happy to modify that to say that it's an Australian bank for that better coverage.
Are there any other comments, Peter?
Yes, just while we're talking about the Treasury policy, I noted in 422 item C, it talks about the if we raise new fixed interest rate borrowings, we'll consider medium to long-term borrowings for 3 years or more that have a fixed interest rate, require interest payments only, and allow the full amount of principal to be paid at the end of the term of maturity. I haven't actually seen a clause like that previously anywhere, but does that mean there will be no consideration of a principal and interest type loan, mortgage type loan?
So can I just confirm 4.2.3B, is that the, on page 39 of the attachments? Don't have a C in my. Oh, 4.22, sorry. I agree with the interpretation there. I don't think that that was actually the intent. I might actually just defer that to Erin to see if she can add some more information onto that as to whether the intent of that is to, considering we've got our borrowing mix of fixed and variable.
Through the chair, I think the original intent of it was if we were to get an interest only loan as well. So it's probably not very clear about, so we probably need to reword that one. Yes. Mm-hmm. Correct.
Through the chair, I think in having read that, I think it is still allowing, I think the way it's been worded, because it's in 3 and statements and the and statement at the end. So we're saying that needs to raise fixed interest rate borrowings will consider using medium to long-term borrowings that have a fixed interest rate. And I think we just need to combine, have a required interest payment only and the full amount to be repaid at maturity. So we'll probably just reword that to include that we can have some credit foncier loans as well. Yeah.
Are there any other questions on the policies? Yeah. Yep, yep. Yep, okay, Peter.
Just a minor query on the rate rebates one, which under clause 4213 has the word conduce. Don't have the page number here, I'm sorry. It is in policy and it's clause 4.2.1.3, I think.
Sorry, Peter, it was 4 point, what did you say?
4.2.
Yeah. On page
1.
29.
29.
Yeah. 29.
Yeah. 2.1. You found it? Yeah. What does that? Yeah, well, the contributes being taken out and conduce is being put in its place. Does it? I've never heard it before in that context.
It was something to do with making it easier or enabling.
All right, so we'll change that one back to contribute. All right, are there any other questions or comments on the policies? Everyone happy with them? So I think if we change if we put this into the recommendation, and yes, you're ahead of me. So that we've got here, so the recommendation is that we note the following policies, being the rate rebates, data management and treasury management, and endorse the proposed amendments. And then number 2 is recommend that the council adopts the following policies. And so we've included rates rebates as amended, data management, treasury management as amended, expenditure policy. And the third item being that the CEO be authorised to make changes of a minor or technical nature to the policies adopted by council. Now, do I have a mover? Christine? Seconder? Councillor Kosh? All in favour? Carried. Okay, moving on to 6.5. The procurement policy review. Okay, councillor Kosh, you got a question?
Yeah, look, just reading for procurement, the objectives, for example, there's some really good objectives. But do you think that this policy is skewed more to the larger scale businesses as compared to the smaller scale businesses? Because I've had a number of small businesses in Gawler say it's just too hard to actually get a contract with Gawler because we have to go through all these hoops and we, you know, they're just barriers they think to actually getting the contract. So just like a comment about that.
Renee, are you able to answer that? Yep.
Through the chair, the policy is based on a model policy prepared by Local Government Association Procurement. So it includes objectives that are geared at local government and not particularly any side business. There is a lot of I guess the objectives in the policy are the guidelines to staff and to the community of what we intend to do when we are going through procurement processes, and then we also provide the procurement methods and the thresholds associated with that. So it's really clear for the community what the processes we go through when we're procuring.
Sharon just wants to make a comment on that.
Through the chair, I just probably want to add a comment to that, as well as I don't necessarily think it's the policy per se that potentially prevents or deters local businesses. It's the evaluation process and the information that they actually need to provide, and I suppose the compliance requirements around the I suppose the financial conditions and the work health and safety and all those things that we need to comply with, that tend to probably I suppose deter local businesses from saying it's too hard. So I think it's probably not necessarily the policy, but potentially working somehow with businesses to try and, I suppose, help them out in being positioned to be able to meet our requirements from a documentation perspective.
Yeah, Redmond.
Well, I think that goes against supporting local business. And I tend to agree with you, Councillor Kosh, that we are here to support our local businesses, and if they're not applying because it's too difficult, and if they need help from council staff to overcome the barriers, then that's not okay either. There has to be a better way I know we're a government entity and there's requirements. However, with the LGA model policy come from LGA procurement, that also is very much targeted at larger businesses. So I wonder whether there's a role for, you know, smaller local businesses, because otherwise we're not going to get local business engaging, and that's not okay. We are a local government entity. We're supposed to be the closest government to the community. If that's not occurring, then we must be doing, we have to have a different policy or an excerpt in the policy that is fit for purpose for small business. Most of our businesses in Gawler are small businesses. They're not large businesses. They're not going to get those large contracts that LGA procurement attract. So, you know, what are we doing if we're not supporting local business? And if it's too hard, we need to, I think we need a different policy. I think we need a policy for small business. What does that look like? I don't know. And I don't know if other councils have better policies that are more attuned to local small business. So I'm just a bit concerned that this fits larger businesses. It's not fitting our businesses here in Gawler. So what are we going to do about that?
Just as an example, when I was on holidays, another council, and there was a local contractor doing the cleaning of all the council facilities, and they were a family-based local business. Now, we don't do that here in Gawler, but for this council, they do. And I just want to know why a large council can actually engage a local community, a local family business to do quite a diverse range of cleaning, which I saw, you know, they're doing a whole range of different things. And we can't, we don't seem to be able to do it. So I think that's where there's an issue, I think, with this policy. We're not allowing the smaller scale, wonderful operators, you know, a foot in the door to actually do the job. That's my concern.
Any other comments?
Maybe we can define small. So for example, the lowest threshold here is $30,000. So if we're talking about Gawler small businesses, would most be covered by contracts less than 30,000? If so, maybe there's some room by looking at what other councils do to make it easier for local businesses to participate. And we keep the stricter stuff for the bigger dollars.
I think we've got to take this whole policy in context, and that council has these range of objectives that we're going to consider alongside achieving value for money. So we're not going to achieve all these objectives every time, but when we're looking at the different types of goods and services, it really comes down to the planning phase and how we're going to procure and what our objectives and what the outcomes should be. So with the local economic benefit, we're increasing the weighting to 15% minimum. If we're doing a market analysis and we determine that we're looking at the market for cleaners, for example, and we go, there are local businesses in Gawler that would likely be capable of meeting our requirements. We could bump that weighting up to 30–40%. It really is in the planning phase, and through our procedure and guidelines and our training with staff on how we emphasise a local business and the benefit to local business. This policy is written to comply with the Local Government Act, which has a range of requirements. So we can't exclude those requirements from the policy, but we can definitely put an emphasis through our practices on supporting local business. Often the most difficult thing for them is the complying with the work health and safety requirements, and that is something
where we've got it is a real balancing act, because we can't ignore the work health and safety requirements. And we've got to be careful when we get too involved in preparing their work health and safety documents for them or assisting them. Because there's a line where we then start taking on the risk if something goes wrong, because we have instructed them on how to prepare them. But we can definitely provide guidance and direction in where to get that assistance. And the other thing is that it's not only about us engaging those local suppliers, it's about us, you know, going through that process where we're helping them, giving them work, and through that they're developing their systems, their quality systems and environmental systems and work health safety systems, that they then are able to take opportunities with other government entities and expand outside of just Gawler Council, but taking up opportunities with other councils and state government.
I think it's a really good idea coming from a state government background. What you can do, you'd have to check it against legislation, but what I believe you can do is you might be able to have a local Gawler business panel. And so what they do is, because you've got the procurement requirements, they have their pack and they have more time to, you know, they have this one initial pack that puts them onto the panel. And then when they're bidding for work, they only need to fill in a one-pager for the cost of that work, as opposed to having us. I think that was the problem that Councillor Kosh was saying, is that they don't have time to be doing the in-depth application every time it comes out to market. But I reckon, and then you could help, they'd have lots of time for you to help them to get their little pack together, that then they'd qualify for the panel. And then once, and this is what, you know, the government agency that I work with do, is that once you're on that panel, then you can, and it's actually a really lot faster way of procuring services, because you're basically going on price.
Through the chair, that is the direction I'm hoping to take council in, is establishing more panel arrangements where we have got standing offer arrangements with suppliers, so that every time we go to procure goods or services of that nature, we don't need to go through a full procurement process. They've already pre-qualified in all those different areas. And the other thing is, you know, with the increasing the threshold for that direct procurement up to $30,000, and by emphasising the importance, you know, if we're looking at direct procurement, what's available locally, and going to that first, because that's in line with our procurement objectives. We're reducing the detriment to suppliers, where we're always going to the same suppliers asking for quotes. They don't get the work, then they become upset because they're going through the process but not getting engaged.
Yeah.
Through the chair, and I suppose just listening to the comments from the chamber, I suppose it also provides us an opportunity as council to actually work with the business development group as well, to sit there and say, okay, well, what sort of programs they can run to actually help them and better skill them up to actually potentially, I suppose, be in a better position to actually do some of that compliance, take away some of that compliance burden as well. So I think that that's probably just an opportunity that we can take on board and have some talk discussions within, from an administration perspective, as to how we can, through our processes and practices and all that sort of stuff, how can we actually make it easier for local businesses to engage with us, and it's I think it's an issue across the board, across all councils, once with that small business, because of those compliance requirements, and how do we minimise that for the businesses to, I suppose, encourage them more to tender or apply for work.
Because how long has the 30 grand limit been in place?
The 30 grand for the direct procurement is what I'm proposing in this policy. Previously, it was $10,000 for direct sourcing.
Yeah.
And that's been in place for 10 years.
Yeah, and so it's
So-
gone from 10 to 30.
Yeah.
The state government, yeah, it's gone from 30 to 50, which is the same. I'm assuming that's what you're looking at. So yeah, sorry, Henry, have you got a comment?
Yeah, further to the conversation being had, and I just asked Renee what would be the consequences if the policy wasn't endorsed at this meeting, and she didn't indicate there was a serious consequence. So if the policy is deferred, then I can work with staff over the next number of weeks or month or so. We can present the policy back at the next audit committee, but with some further detail about an action plan or approach to make it easier relative to local small businesses and medium-sized businesses, how we would do that, what timeframes that action plan could sort of roll over in terms of a period, and then reflect back on the policy, see whether or not the policy needs to be further refined in terms of that local small to medium-sized business. And if there is a consequence to the policy, we'll present some track changes. If there's not a consequence, there might be some greater comfort through the audit committee that yes, the policy is sound, but these are the practices that we need to pursue in terms of engaging with small business, communication, where we're at with these panels, and what are the panels, and what's the time frame for those panels, and other techniques that we could pick up from other councils in terms of making the application of the policy easier for small businesses. So if the committee is inclined for us to do so, then we can have it deferred, and then we can do that further work.
Yep, I think that's everyone's happy with that. So if we change, how do we do that? We change the recommendation, or there's no. Okay, so we defer this to a future meeting. We still need a mover and seconder. Yep. Okay. So we'll defer this item to a future meeting after management perform some additional investigation and recommendations. So the mover is Mayor Redmond and seconded by Councillor Koch. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Okay, so we move on to item 6.6, which is review of the FY23 external audit plan. Sharon, did you want to comment to this?
Through the chair, I don't really have anything to add other than it's the third year that Galpins are actually been doing the external audit for us. So it's fairly stock standard program that I understand that's been very similar to what's been presented to the committee in the past.
Are there any questions? Christine?
Just wondering how this proposed fee of 21,200 compares to a prior year. Have they just increased it by inflation, or have they had some efficiency improvements?
Through the chair, so the fee's been increased by 2%.
That's right. Yep. We'll take that. You got any questions, Peter? You're no, all good? Everyone okay? I've got a mover for the recommendation to recommend the FY23 external audit plan to the council for endorsement. Christine moving, Peter seconding. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Okay, item 6.7 is the FY20, is that right? FY23 Treasury Management Review. 22 Treasury Management Review. Yeah. Have I got someone that wants to speak to this item? Erin, volunteer.
Through the chair, sure. I haven't got anything prepared. We did have another year where we were pretty reliant on Big CAD all of 2021-22. We were fortunate towards the end of the financial year to get quite a bit of grant funding, which helped our position at the end of the financial year, but I think within like a couple of days. I'm just trying to think if there was anything else. I think that was about all. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take any questions.
Got any questions? Yes, Christine.
Just wondering if we could receive this report earlier than February, as it's based on June 30 balances.
Yeah, is that possible? Erin?
Absolutely, yes. We've historically done it in February, but we have the capability absolutely to get it done earlier.
Good idea, councillor Kosh.
Yeah, I'm just looking on page 29 of 66, and there's a little red line at the top there, 100%. Is that the maximum we can borrow as a council?
Through the chair, yes, correct. Yeah.
The question is about subsidiaries. How does that work with subsidiaries? If we're going to number subsidiaries, if a subsidiary wanted to borrow money for a capital item, how does that work with that ceiling?
Sharon.
Through the chair, so subsidiaries are their own entity, so they would actually have to, depending on what the ability for them to borrow based on their charter, so they would actually do the borrowings themselves. So their borrowings, so we wouldn't borrow on their behalf, so effectively they'd borrow themselves, and then effectively from our perspective, we just bring in equity account their position as at the end of the financial year.
Just on that, but who holds the risk for that loan? Multiple councils.
Through the chair. So effectively it is the owners who are the subsidiaries, the constituent councils. So through the ownership structure, the constituent councils do bear the risk. And that's where it's a question on what the position of the charter for each of the individual subsidiaries for what their borrowing limits and their borrowing capacity and the approvals and that need to actually go through to determine how much they can borrow and when they can borrow.
So in their charter, there'll be an upper borrowing amount, essentially?
Through the chair, I suppose that's from past practices of regional subsidiaries that I've been involved in. Their charter would specify, I suppose, the process that they need to actually go through to actually undertake those borrowings. I'm not across the charters of the regional subsidiaries here, but that's how I've been exposed to it in the past.
Yeah, Redmond.
Some subsidiaries request councils to pay certain monies. That's happened recently at Adelaide Plains Council in the public agenda. And that was a subsidiary, a regional subsidiary. So they come to council and ask for money. Don't they? Well, they do. They do. They do.
Sorry.
Yeah, on a number of, we'll actually come to council and request funds to fund operations, capital, whatever, yeah.
Happy? Yep. Okay, okay.
So the money that we got from grants was the election promises? Was that the money?
Through the chair, correct. There was some local roads community infrastructure grant funding in that, so I'd have to take that on notice exactly what came in just before the end of June.
Yep. Are there any other questions? No, so we've got the recommendation, the Audit and Risk Committee recommends to council that the FY22 Treasury Management Review be noted. To have a mover. Christine, seconder. Mayor Redmond, all in favour? Carry unanimously. Okay, item 6.8 is the Audit and Risk Committee work plan with the progress report and 2023 ordinary meeting dates. Sharon, did you want to speak to this?
So the report is just basically providing an update of the status of the work plan that I would assume was adopted at the start of the 22-23 financial year. just with the progress of where we're at with that program. In the report, I do note that considering that there is a change of the terms of reference, and due to the change of the requirements from the local government reform, whether the audit committee want to review that earlier or will wait till the start of the 23-24 financial year when we would actually undertake the standard review or development of the work plan for the coming financial year. But so I'll leave that into your hands. And there's just a set of meeting dates there that have been presented for, I suppose, for your adoption, just to make sure that they are suitable. There is a requirement that we have at least one meeting per quarter. And these dates have been set up to around key deliverables, the budget review, the adoption of the budget, and also the adoption of the financial statements. You will note that we've brought forward the October meeting so that we're actually in a position to have the financial statements presented to the October council meeting for adoption, rather than bring them out to the end of November.
A minor point, you've got 4th of April meeting twice. You've got sets the ordinary meeting dates, although the 4th of April is a special committee meeting, and then you've got point 3 that notes a special committee meeting is scheduled for Tuesday. Do we need that in there twice?
We can just take that. Yep, done. Magic. Yep, no, you're right. Peter?
Yeah, through Chair. I was just wondering whether, and maybe the April meeting's a good time to have it, but given the issue of the valuations that we talked about earlier with the civil or the roads and so on, I'm just wondering if we could have a bit of an update on where we're at with all of the asset classes. I think we've got buildings on the plan there somewhere, but we just used to get a bit of a status report on where we're at with all the asset categories in terms of when they were last valued, when they're or condition assessed as well, and when they're due for, and what the program is for reviewing those into the future, and maybe an update as to what our findings are so far with the current issue on the civil infrastructure. That would be useful, and that would be timely as well with the budget consideration as well.
Yep, that's a good point. Christine?
This might be a really dumb question, but when I'm looking at this audit committee work plan, it's got 7 columns with 7 different months, but we've scheduled to have 5 meetings this year. So I wasn't quite sure how all the topics fitted into the 5 meetings that we've got scheduled. I'm on page 100.
Through the chair, I think that's because this is the 22-23 program. And so then that basically takes into a couple of from the start of this financial year, as opposed to these are for the remainder of the calendar year as well.
After that.
I told you it's a dumb question. Just another one for the Treasury plan. No, it's okay. I was going to say move it to November, but that would be November 23, which is not on this calendar. It's all right.
Any other questions in relation to the progress report? The meeting dates? Yeah, will we get a future work plan after July?
through the chair, so the plan would be at that July meeting, we would actually present a work plan for the 23-24 financial year.
Okay, if there's no other questions, we've been recommended that the Audit and Risk Committee notes the Audit and Risk Committee Work Plan Update Report, sets the ordinary meeting dates for the committee for the 2nd of May, 4th of July and 17th of October, and notes a special committee meeting is scheduled for the 4th of April. Did we, for the purpose of reviewing the draft FY24 budget, and did you want to put in and an update on the asset?
update on the asset.
So can we add that to item 3 and an update on the asset revaluation review? Or something to that effect. Okay, everyone happy with that? Have I got a mover? Mayor Redmond, the seconder. Christine, all in favour? Carried unanimously. All right. Now we're moving on to item 7, which is the information report. So 7.1 is the Climate Emergency Action Plan. Is there anyone that would like to talk to this? Yep. Are there any questions? Mayor Redmond.
Yes, thank you, Tim, for this report. According to the resolution, which happened on the 23rd of August last year, provides an information report to a future audit committee with an overview on what positive and negative financial outcomes could be attracted as actions from the SEEP are implemented. I appreciate that it's a very positive document, but we were keen to have a balanced approach, and I think that there could have been some more detail around just the financial impact of implementing the SEEP, and I appreciate this is an aspiration plan. However, I think that, yeah, I was hoping for a more of a balanced approach. That would be their only comments.
Are there any other comments, or did you want to respond to that? No. Did you want to make comments? Feel free to come up and make some comments.
Through the chair, thank you for that feedback. There are challenges in understanding the full financial impacts of projects that have not yet gone through the budget process and the feasibility hasn't been decided on them. So until we do that work, we can't assess the cost of future projects. Some of them may result in a saving, others will cost money. So we were clear on the one that was going to have the biggest financial impact that we could reasonably forecast into the future, which was the Greening of Gawler initiative, in which we put up a budget bid for some $200,000 per year through to 2030. So that's the biggest climate adaptation initiative. And there was also, related to that, there was also the Backyards Biodiversity Program, continuing that, which has a budget impact. On other future renewables projects, we're still doing work on what might transpire into the future, and we'll come back to council when we know more about any of that work. We're scheduled to bring back more information at the April IES meeting on that. And on other future initiatives, I guess they'll go through the budget process before we can really sort of say this is what it would cost.
Thank you. Councillor Bosch.
Look, I suppose there's 2 programs then I'd probably like to get some clarity on. The first is the Green and Gawler one, $200,000. How many trees is that a year?
Through the chair. Nominally, that would be approximately 200 to 300 additional trees per year, depending on how it plays out and how you go with contracting and what other funding you could attract to help fund that. We're also looking at partnerships with Department of Infrastructure and Transport that are looking at doing more greening as one of their priorities in South Australia. So we can attract some of their investment into Gawler. We'll be looking at that as well. And that can actually help us achieve our goals without spending quite as much money.
That's the question.
Just on that, that equates at $1,000 per tree, which I think seems like a lot of money. Also, this is only concentrating on trees, and it may be not aligning with our biodiversity plan, where we actually have to look at more than trees. We have to look at middle and lower story planting. I'm just concerned about that. The other one is that I think there has been a study on on-site renewable projects. I think that's at the depot. How's that going? I thought that was close to completion, and you've actually got a figure for that or not?
Through the chair, on the greening of Gawler initiative, the Climate Emergency Action Plan is quite clear that it's also about restoring biodiversity and microbe rewilding sites and other things. So we'll work with the open space teams to actually get those balances right. So it's not just all about trees, it's about greening appropriately where you can. It may come across that way, but it's certainly not that way. On the renewables project, yes, the council endorsed the development of a plan and program quite some time ago, and the staff and administration are working through what that might mean, and we will be bringing that report back to council at the April IES meeting with more information. And there's a number of possibilities for that as well, which we'll discuss at that time.
Christine?
Just a question. I'm on page 39 of the agenda document, where it lists the council emissions by scope 2019 to 20. And scope 2 is about consumption of electricity from the grid, 835 tonnes. Further in the paper, it talks about when the LED lighting project is implemented, which we've just heard is pretty well complete, that will reduce emissions by 275 tonnes. So I'm just wondering if that project did decrease emissions by roughly a quarter of scope 2. And because the project's pretty well finished, I think a dollar amount can be allocated to that project as well. So that's an example of what the Mayor was talking about, putting some dollars in here. That would be one that could have been costed and compared to the reduction in emissions.
Thank you. Through the chair, there is actually a report going to council to the IES committee on progress on implementing the Climate Emergency Action Plan. This one's about how it will be implemented, but in that progress report, we've actually got the estimated savings for 22-23 from the public lighting project. So yes, it is progressing very well. There'll be a cost saving from the reduction in the asset management tariff and an additional cost saving in the avoidance of electricity consumption. And those two together, I forget the number, $82,000 this financial year. That saving will be higher next year when we've got a full year of that saving, because it's a recurrent saving. So it occurs every year and it will help into the future. So yes, as that information is becoming available, we'll be able to show it. When I looked at the invoices, the reduction in the asset management tariff isn't coming through the invoices yet. As soon as we get the December invoices, we'll start to see that. And we'll be keeping an eye out for the reduction in the electricity costs as well from that saving.
Are you able to make any comment on the quantity of the reduction in emissions as a result of that project?
Through the chair, so it hasn't significantly changed. It was going to result in a greater than 65%, a greater than 60%, roughly 65% reduction of the public lighting emissions. And that would lay between about 20 and 30% of council's emissions overall, just from the change to the street lighting. So it was a significant improvement.
Peter, your question?
Yeah, just a comment initially. I mean, I think it's a fantastic report and fantastic initiatives that the council's taken. It's quite a comprehensive report that's being prepared here. In terms of going forward, it might be good to produce something of like a 3-year program which has dollars and things attached to it. Beyond 3 years is probably getting a bit ambitious, but 3 years might be a good perspective to have a look at. That might help understand what the impact is going to be on the budget, so that we can actually have resources to make this happen in a realistic way.
I think that's a good point. If you sort of have a roadmap as to the things that have to be put in place, like there's no point having a fleet of electric vehicles if you haven't got the infrastructure to charge them, et cetera, and with, you know, as you said, in the future, a lot of this technology, the cost of this technology would be coming down. So it's just a sort of, I don't know whether you have sort of, what do you call it, gateways as to what needs to be in place before you sort of go to the next step. Because it all is very new and innovative, and it's a great report, but it's just, yeah, how do you know, eat an elephant? Any other questions? No, well done. It's a good report. Okay, so we've got an officer's recommendation that the Audit and Risk Committee notes the Climate Emergency Action Plan as unanimously endorsed by Council on the 31st of August 22, and notes that actioning of the Climate Emergency Action Plan and the allocation of funds to realise outcomes will be addressed in the context of the annual budget processes, with the financial consequences of such investments being carefully deliberated and considered. Do I have a mover? Christine moving it, seconder. Peter's going to second it. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Okay, item 7.2 is the internal audit work plan update. Nathan, do you want to?
Through the chair. So just what we've been working on, the LGRS has undertaken 2 procedure validations. One was on our plant procedure. The other one was on the return to work procedure. The next audit that is actually occurring at council is on our legislative compliance framework. At the time of writing this report, we didn't have a detailed scope. We're just working through the final details of that, with the anticipation that that will be starting in the next 3 weeks. So by the next audit committee, not the financial one, the following one, that audit report will be coming back to this committee as well. Besides that, we're actually just working, we've had quite a few audits. Some of them were quite large, around like our asset management audit, the IT disaster recovery audit. So we've been progressing the actions that were identified in those audits. Some are long-term actions, some we're still progressing quite quickly. Also in this, we provided the update that we engaged CyberCX, and it's the uplift report, which is basically, this was a company that we utilized where Bentley's had identified these were some gaps. CyberX are actually filling those gaps for us, or telling us how that we should be resolving those issues.
Yeah. Thank you. Are there any questions? Mayor Redmond?
Just make some comments on the CyberCX project. There's quite a number of recommendations, and there is, I think, there's opportunities to engage and speed this up. What's the approach being taken by the administration in this matter?
Through the chair, So we received this report in like December. We've been working with the IT team and that to actually be building these recommendations back into our internal audit action plan as they were referenced or arose from internal auditing. So the next progress report, those recommendations will be included as well as timelines and required actions. You'll notice one of them is in line with our business interruption analysis. Well, that actually links back to our business continuity plan, which we are reviewing, updating this year. So it's about ensuring that where we say our business continuity plan, customer service, they say, well, we can only last 4 hours without IT, where our disaster recovery plan for IT says it takes 6 hours to start up our service from scratch. It then becomes a discussion point over how long can customer service last? What could we do to stretch that time out? Or what resources does IT need to look at to reduce that startup time from a complete server failure? So that's just, we don't know exactly how long, but that's where we're, yeah, it'll be reported through the committee for the next action, in the next action plan.
Yeah, and I've seen that kind of recommendation is very common in organisations, so it's just speeding it up, making sure it's consistent. Everyone sort of looks at their own little bit, but it's just making sure there's an overall view from BIA about that. Are there any recommendations that you think you'll have trouble implementing, or you think they're all pretty reasonable and shouldn't, you know, you should be able to fully implement?
Through the chair, they're all achievable. It just some might take a year to implement or a little bit longer. But speaking with Emma, yeah, we're not foreseeing any major.
So I think it's important just to track them so they don't fall off the radar, even if they are long term. And you know, you can have recommendations that take a year or so to implement. That's common practice, but just making sure that they continue to be tracked and not forgotten. Mayor Redmond.
Thank you for that. When will we get an update report, if it's 12 months, 18 months, to see how these recommendations are going?
These recommendations will be built into the action plan that's in this report. So they'll become actions. That way they're being reported back to this committee for what was the recommendation or improvement opportunity done by CyberCX, and then what is council's resolution to how we're going to achieve that, and also the timeline. So that way we can ensure that the audit and risk committee again being kept up to date, but also Henry and exec and keep staff accountable and make sure it doesn't drop off. So, question.
Yep. Who wants to respond?
Yeah, through the chair. So effectively, when we provide an update report, which is we will do quarterly, it will be incorporated in that attachment that's presented as part of that report as to where we're at with regard to those recommendations. So, so attachment 1 will be expanded to include the recommendations from the audits that were actually undertaken, and we'll give regular updates at that point in time and how it's been resolved and where we're at.
Nathan, I'll also share with you, I've got a good little template as well that I'll forward for your information. I shared it with another council, so it's only fair that you get a copy as well. So it's a 1-pager. It might be easier just to, like, it's really good information, but then you can do like a 1-page summary, just going, this has been imposed, you know, implemented, you know, if they're outstanding, you know, kind of giving you a timeline and status, so which helps. Okay, is there any other questions on the audit work plan? No, if not, we've got a recommendation that the internal audit work plan update report be received and noted. Have I got a mover? Councillor Kosh, seconder. Peter, all in favour, carry unanimously. Okay, item 7.3 is the risk management update. We got Nathan, you're back again.
Through the chair, thank you. So late last year, we've been, our enterprise risk management framework was reported back to this committee. We're ongoing developing it. We're not just sitting stagnant. So at the moment, we're currently reviewing which system we're using for reporting, generating reports, but also monitoring controls for strategic operational risk. At the moment, we're using SkyTrust, but we're finding some of the reporting templates are limited. And if you're wanting to do a heat map from year to year to track, it's unable to do that. I have to manually do that, which isn't preferred and it's taking time. So we currently use Control Track for our financial risks. It's very common in the local government sector. There is a added module called Risk Manager module, which we have already purchased. So we've actually transferred a sample set of our operational risk into Risk Manager. It's a completely separate subset of fields, so it won't touch council's financials at all, but we're able to manage our strategic and operational risk in the same format that our financial risks are. So we're leading the way in this. There's 4 or 5 councils that are actually watching what we're doing in this space to see if we jump ship from SkyTrust to go to Risk Manager. They're actually watching us because we're fairly advanced in our SkyTrust usage at council. So yeah, we'll know soon, but if it does, it means you'll be able to get the same style of reporting for strategic operational risk as your financial, including control assessments. So that's actually really exciting. As far as what we're doing with our enterprise risk management framework for the next year, there's a large body of work. I believe that there's a workshop on the 15th of March where Bentley's will be running that through the elected members and also the independents to give them an example of what is risk management, what is risk appetite, what are we doing?
We developed statements late last year. Is that going to be presented or not?
Through the chair, yes, the draft statements will be discussed and presented, and then the draft framework will then be going to council because we wanted for them to have an understanding before they endorse the framework. So one of the things we've actually been working on over the last month is actually realigning our risk consequence table to the community plan. Because at the moment, it's actually really sexy. Sorry, I'm actually really enjoying this.
I'm as a risk person, this is sounding really good.
Yeah. Our current risk consequence matrix, which we had in 2016, and most councils are the same, it is financial, people, service delivery, legislation. Well, the entire thing that drives this council is our community plan. So we should actually be aligning our risk matrix to the community plan. We've also enhanced it. So when we did the consequence matrix, heritage wasn't really on our radar there. Well, we've now linked heritage to our identity. We've linked asset management is now to community. Does that give you a flavor? So we've expanded our consequence matrix to include more categories, but link them to a community goal. So it means when we're actually, and one of the other steps that we're working on is reviewing our council reports. So when we tell you there's a risk if we don't do this, or it's a positive and negative framework, and that's the matrix. So if we say there might be a negative is financial, however, there could be an extreme positive for carbon emissions. We're actually tracking carbon emissions. We're building that in as well. It means that the council can get a full appetite of what is the benefit and what is the negative, but it's linked to the community plan goals. So that's what we're working on, and couldn't quite get it there to give you an idea today, but it will be, it's very close.
Like I'm playing risk bingo. No, well done. That sounds really good. And you know, it's that whole concept that, you know, risk is what prevents you from achieving your strategic objectives. And if you keep that front of mind and linking it all back to strategy, it makes it a whole lot easier for, you know, management and council to understand. Good work. Are there any other comments or questions? No? That sounds good to me. Very excited. Okay, so 7.3, we've got the recommendation that the Audit and Risk Committee recommends to council that the risk management update report be received and noted. I've got a mover. Peter, seconder, Christine, all in favour, carried unanimously. Item 7.4 is the FY24 annual business plan and budget timetable. Sharon.
Through the chair, this is just realistically presented for information, just so the audit committee understands the process that and the timetable for the key deliverables for the annual business plan and the budget for this coming financial year. So take any questions?
Any questions, Peter?
Yeah, I'm just trying to get the timing right. So the adoption of the recurrent budget is in the 28th of March by council. And then it comes to the Audit and Risk Committee, including an overview on the long-term financial plan. So I'm just and it goes to public consultation in May, yeah. So I guess I'm wondering what if the opportunity for the audit committee to have audit and risk committee to have input into or a review of what's happening in the recurrent budget in particular before it gets too late and it's swept up in the public consultation process and so on.
Through the chair. So the intent of it is so the recurrent budget basically gets, I suppose, endorsed and adopted by the council, and it would come to the audit committee for comment and recommendations. And then prior to it going out for public consultation, the budget and the annual business plan, which basically incorporates the projects and budget, would then come back to the council, which would incorporate the feedback from the audit and risk committee in that report when they consider the annual business plan and the budget for adoption prior for it to going out to public consultation. So that timeframe does provide an opportunity for the audit committee to have feedback and input into that before it goes out to public consultation.
I'm just thinking of you know, the debates that we might have again about, you know, the level of the operating surplus or deficit and the, you know, the liabilities and all that sort of stuff. It kind of doesn't seem like it gives enough time for that to be considered by council, because they're really adopting the budget at their next meeting. It's out to public consultation, saying it's out to public consultation. So it just seems to me that there may be not enough wriggle room to, unless we're having some discussion about what the targets are earlier in the process, or the framework. So.
It's actually really important that the council gets feedback from the independent members from the audit committee, because it really does help. It really does help, particularly new councillors. We have 4 new councillors that this will be their first time going through a budget process, and that can be quite daunting. And to have some sage advice from experienced independent members makes a big difference. I've seen that over a number of terms now, that it does make a big difference with, you know, recommendations, particularly if we're looking at reviewing the asset depreciation figure. That's actually quite important, because that's over $1 million deficit, adding to the deficit. And I think that from my perspective, the elected members, I'm not sure what Councillor Koch thinks, but I think it might be useful. Anyway, they're my comments.
Councillor Koch?
Yeah, look, I agree with that, because the advice we got last time around was very useful when it came back to the chamber. So I think we modified the rate of the dollar, and Yeah, we actually, and that came from this audit committee because we looked at the long-term financial plan and the bigger picture, and that was very helpful when we went back to the chamber. So the more input you can get from the audit committee, the better, I think.
Through the chair, we can do that. I think the adjustment that we'll actually need to do then is rather than try and, I suppose from developing the program is trying to minimise the special council meetings for the council. So we would have to move the adoption of the report to after that consideration and or maybe bring forward the audit committee risk meeting, but we can't necessarily bring that forward very much because of the volume of work that actually needs to, I suppose, get it to that recurrent budget and project stage in the first instance. So yeah, so we could move that 28th of March meeting that would go to the ordinary council meeting and try and slot in a special council meeting after that special council meeting of the audit and risk, and then before the adoption of it coming out to going out to for public consultation. 18th of April. Okay, yeah, so we can change that timetable to basically incorporate a special council meeting and move that ordinary council meeting. Yeah. Yep. And then that will allow, because I think the other issue is that because Easter and Anzac Day and all that sort of stuff as well was in that period, the working days to actually make the modifications from our perspective to meet the timelines is also problematic as well. So those, you know, that the time frame is probably a bit problematic is all I can say, because of especially when Easter and Anzac Day are in the same month. But we can work with that. The intent and all that sort of stuff. So,
Peter?
Would you have the your rating scenarios around that time as well, so that we can sort of link those together? Is that likely?
I'm sorry, I've cut you off.
sorry. This is, I know that normally the valuations, the initial valuations or the first cut of the valuations don't normally come out until March, so it will be very preliminary at that point in time as well. So I know that I'd have to double check as to when we get the first cut of our valuations, but I know that in previous roles we never used to get them until mid-March. So it's sort of like a quick crunch of the numbers, and they're very preliminary at that point in time, because obviously there's a whole heap of changes that go through those valuations depending on where the land services are at their cycle.
But you will need to have them in your annual business plan, won't you? So, because I think that's where we had some comments previously, and I think it would be good to have some consideration of that as well.
Through the chair, so obviously we've got the 2 information sessions as well. So I'm assuming I am making an assumption that those invitations are extended to the audit committee to actually participate in some of those information sessions as well, with respect to, I suppose, where the position of the budget is at as well. So that I suppose that also provides an opportunity for the committee to have input into the budget process as well. And that's effectively, even though it will be relatively quite early in the process, because we would have only probably just received the valuations, but the general principles of what's actually being applied and compared to the parameters will be presented at those two information sessions that one, the project bids obviously in the one in a couple of weeks' time, and then following up with the recurrent introducing where the recurrent budget is at this point in time as well. So I think that also provides an opportunity for the committee to provide, I suppose, their thoughts to the rest of the council as well through the budget process.
Yep, thank you for that, Peter. Yep. Any other questions or comments? No, so do we want to amend the recommendation just to say that the Audit and Risk Committee notes the budget timetable for the preparation of the FY24 annual business plan and budgets with amendments to be made or as amended? Okay. Yes. Yep, cool. So Mayor Redmond is the mover. We've got a seconder. Councillor Kosh, all in favour? Carried unanimously. Okay. Item 7.5 is the FY22 external audit opinion, which seems a long way away and was pretty straightforward as it was an unqualified opinion. So we've got the recommendation that the Audit and Risk Committee recommend the council that the audit opinions relating to the FY22 general purpose financial statements and internal controls be received and noted. There's no questions. Do I have a mover? Mayor Redmond, and seconder. Peter, was that your hand? Yep, all in favour, carried unanimously. All right, we've got item 8, which is items listed for discussion, which there are none. Item 9 is questions without notice. Did you want to stay?
Just a question around being able to access audit committee papers on the Friday before the audit committee meeting. We had some challenges over the weekend. So just wondering if we can make it easier next time, whether it's email or public website or whatever's the best way.
Yes, I do apologise for the technical issues that we actually had with regard to the making it available on the website. So we've looked into those and addressed those and make sure that that won't happen again.
Very good. Okay, any other questions without notice? No. Item 10 is motions without notice. There are none. And then we go straight to item 11, which is the confidential reports, which there is one. And so for the purposes of those watching at home, as per the officer's recommend, oh, sorry. So, oh, can I make a recommendation to go into camera first? Yeah. Hang on. Where am I? And so the reason for, yeah.
Thank you. I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation that we move into confidence, and the reason for moving into confidence is tenders for the supply of goods, provision of services, or the carrying out of works, and that's pursuant to section 90 subsection 3 of the Local Government Act. So I hope people will support this, and we do have people who are allowed to stay in camera. We have the CEO, we have the Executive Manager, Community and Strategy. Have we got them here? No, they're not here. Executive Manager, Development and Compliance, they're not here. Executive Manager, Finance, it's you, Sharon. Executive Manager, Infrastructure and Operations, they can be crossed off. Minute taker, and the Risk and Work Health Safety Advisor. So anyone who I didn't mention or who is not here probably needs to leave the room. Have a good night. So I'm happy to move that way. So we've got the CEO, we've got the Manager Finance, Risk, WHS Advisor and Minute Taker.